My grandfather, Henry Nail, was just a real powerful figure. He wasn't a tall guy, but he was built out of nothing but muscle. He was a big round guy in the later part of his life. He just kind of filled up. I don't know. He was like a balloon. I don't know. Tight, muscular, tough guy. I mean, just he was a no nonsense dude. He would laugh a little bit, joke around a little bit, but in such a controlled way. Just like it was all down here somehow. He was a great guy, very capable, great builder. I grew up running around this like whatever 2 acres or something in Northside Winston-Salem, and it felt to me like we lived out in the country. Because when you're that age, you don't know. You see it visually, and you don't look at the grand picture. In my view, if you had barns, if you had a big garden and a little barn and scarecrows and outbuildings and a tractor, you lived in the country. It didn't matter if you were, just down the road from a city. You were in the country because that's what the country looks like. And it was much later in life that it occurred to me that like we didn't live in the country. We really lived in the city limits, but just my grandfather had just kind of recreated what he loved about his childhood in these couple little lots that he was able to buy. He was a great builder. He built all these buildings. He built when he was approaching retirement, I guess, he built this log cabin next door to his house as just like a craftsman project. Just like, I want to have a log cabin to work out of. But I guess the way it was told to me was he kept adding things to it. He added a kitchen because that way he could eat down there, and he added a loft, and he added a bathroom, and he just made it into a whole functioning log cabin. And somehow or another that led to my dad moving in there. And that's the house where I grew up. That's my original home, was the log cabin my grandfather built as just a craft project. And when I was a kid, when it was summertime, me and my sister would be running around, and my grandfather would be working in the garden all the time. And I remember being down there and seeing a worm, and my Uncle David was down there picking up potatoes, and I grabbed a worm and put it on his back. And my grandfather would pull the truck in the backyard, and it would be full of corn and full of potatoes and green beans, and we'd sit out there and we'd shuck and silk corn, and we'd just help him. And I didn't love it, but we would help him. And when I got to be older, and it was a couple years ago, I was at home and I was starting to keep a garden myself and trying to learn about it, and everything was going wrong. All my pumpkins would get eaten up, and literally everything would be eaten up. I never successfully grew a full-size tomato. I grew a bunch of cherry tomatoes, but all my tomatoes would get eaten up by bugs. And my garden was like 6x8. His garden was like a whole football field. And it just went so well. He just did it so well. And I was like, how did he do this? I just don't get it. And there's so much to learn about gardening and about how to do things right. And he somehow had that information. He somehow knew how to build things. It wasn't like he ever went to trade school. It wasn't like he ever read up, blogs about gardening or whatever. He just grew up learning how to do this stuff. He was so synchronized with nature, I guess it seems like to me. I had a school project once where I had to go pick out a bunch of like leaves from like 30 different trees and identify them. And I told him about it, and we just went out and did it. He just named 30 different trees and told me what they were, and I was so astonished by that when I was a kid. How did he know it all? And I asked him how he knew it all, and he said just from being outside, which to me didn't make much sense because it's not like the trees have labels on them. But he was a wise person. So when I was trying to garden, I had this ditty on guitar that I kept playing, and I kept seeing him. I kept seeing him as the subject, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I had this like line, like, I don't mind the rain, I don't mind the snow. These different lines that I would say, and I just couldn't figure it out. And all I did was I'd just go walk my dog, and I'd listen to the guitar part, and I would just think about it. And I don't know what shifted to where I started really writing, but finally it became a song that was really about him and about his garden and about the cabin he built and about my perception of these things and my lack of comparison, to his innate talent. I get really emotional sometimes when I listen closely to the song, and I think it's because of his stoicism. I think when I think about him, and when I think about him truly acting this way, of like, rain doesn't bother me. What we might perceive as an unideal situation doesn't bother me, because it like feeds into the overall picture. You can't have gardens without rain. You can't have gardens without water. And I think it's his stoicism that I look at and I'm just astonished by. And when I compare myself, and when I ask myself, I mean, am I truly stoic? Am I truly accepting of the conditions? It's like one of my shortcomings, I guess, in my mind. It's like I resist so much. I resist what feels unideal so much, and I think that's part of his wisdom that I'd love to learn how to access, how to retain for myself at some point, is that ability to embrace the situation you're in, to truly be able to say, I don't mind.